Hey, what is up guys? Alex here from technoclass.com coming to you with a full review of these two devices. This is the Samsung Galaxy E5 on the left and the Samsung Galaxy E7 on the right. Now looking at these guys, you might think they are pretty flagship level build. You know, they are made of metal. They look really nice, and even thin, thickness wise, they are actually thinner and lighter than the Galaxy S5, which I have right here. So they actually look like flagship devices, but they're actually mid-range. The E5 is priced at $12,990 with a 5-inch display, and a 5.5-inch display on the E7 is priced at 15,990 pesos. They're powered by a Snapdragon 410 64-bit processor, and like I said before, they look very premium. I think these are the best looking mid-range devices from any brand right now, and we are going to review them right now. We'll see you guys in just a bit. Alright guys, so as with any review we do show you what's inside the box. As you can see, we do not have the retail package right here because they came to us in nondescript, review unit packages. Anyway, what you'll be getting is the USB cable for charging and data transfer, a 1.55 amp charger, which has the appropriate Philippine prong right here, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and some earbuds for that headphone jack. And lastly, you do get this pin poker thing, so you can open the SIM tray on the right side, the SIM tray and the micro SD tray. Actually, both of these devices have micro SD card slots to expand your storage. That is really nice. All right, so starting with the E5 right here, we have a 5-inch HD display. This is not full HD. This is 1280 by 720, but this is Super AMOLED. So the colors really pop, and the brightness can go really high, as you can see right here, kind of blinding to the camera. We're going to lower that a little bit. So anyway, the brightness and the display looks really good. I don't know if I can focus that closely. And as you can see, it doesn't look like a 720p panel. It could be even comparable to a full HD panel, and you probably wouldn't notice the difference. This is, of course, the Full HD S5. And as you can see, if I were to choose, I might even prefer this E5 design than the S5. Probably because it is made of metal on the sides. It's thinner, and you might not notice it, but it's actually much lighter. Of course, the S5 has some extra features that come with the flagship design. So, of course, you wouldn't compare that directly. But if you're somebody who's looking for a design-wise, a nice-looking flagship-looking guy, this might be for you. So we're gonna look around the phone itself. We have some sensors on top. A proximity sensor. I don't know what the other one is. I can tell you that there is no light sensitivity sensor on this phone. Both phones do not have the light sensitivity sensor. So one of them is a proximity one. The other is, I don't know. There's a 5-megapixel camera. Both of them have 5-megapixel camera front cameras, which is much better than the S5, and actually takes pretty good pictures. And you have the speaker grill, Samsung logo right there. And on the bottom, we have the home button, which do not have the fingerprint sensor. Of course, it's just a mid-range phone. You sometimes don't need it, to be honest. And you have the sort of lighting up back button and multitask button, which I want to show you later because it's slightly different from the S5. Now that's it for the front. It is a nice looking front. The bezels are fairly thin, and one more place of comparison, the bezels are thinner than the S5 bezels. We have to mention that because it is definitely, if you ask me, I like this design better than the S5. Anyway, we have the left side here. This is just a volume rocker on this side, on the top area right here. Volume rocker, nice metallic volume rocker there. On the bottom, we have a micro USB port for charging the data transfer, 3.5mm headphone jack, and your pinhole microphone on this metal bottom. I don't know why there is sort of this little lip curve thing, but I do like that sort of feeling when you put your pinky in there. You can feel that bottom area. On the right side is where all the micro SD and SIM slots are. You poke this part for the micro SD and SIM 2. You poke this one for the nano SIM for the SIM 1. And of course, you have the power and unlock button here. I believe this is a noise cancellation microphone here on top. There's a sticker here that says Qualcomm 4G. This is LTE 64-bit processor, so that's really, really nice. Both of your SIMs can be used as a LTE SIM. All right, so as for the anatomy of the E7, it's pretty much the same. As you can see, the same sort of placement of sensors and 5-megapixel camera. You have a 5.5-inch HD display. So it's still not full HD, but still very, very nice looking display. You can't really tell it's a it's not a full HD panel, and I'm fairly happy. I don't mind if it's HD. It looks really, really nice. And of course, it's Super AMOLED, giving it the nice, brilliant colors. All right, so looking at the back of these guys, you can see that they are very, very identical. Actually, all of the sides are very identical. And as you can see, we have a camera right here. We have a 13 megapixel camera on the E7. We have an 8 megapixel camera on the E5. A nice shiny speaker grill right here, metallic speaker grill, LED flash, Samsung logo, Duos logo, meaning it is a dual SIM phone, and some trademark decals on the bottom. As far as the texture goes, it is sort of a soft touch plastic, a little bit glossy, but not something that picks up fingerprints. And in terms of color, it is sort of a cream, sort of a dirty white color that will not, get dirty. You can easily clean that. It is a sort of less interesting back than the S5 would have. And of course, the S5 has that shiny Samsung logo, all these shiny parts. But it's still a nice design, very, very simplistic. I would prefer it to not have some of these logos, though. Would have a nice back if it didn't have so much busy, logos and stuff. But still nice looking, and I do like the thickness and lightness of both these devices. All right, so by now you might be wondering why I keep talking about the lightweight of these both devices. It's because I do own an S5, and I have to tell you, the E7 with its 5.5-inch display is actually lighter than the S5 to me, at least in feeling. And of course, the S5 is much, much thicker. I can't really show you. I don't know if I can really show you that. But the S5 is much, much thicker. And the bezels are bigger on the S5 for some reason. I do know that the E5 and the E7 came out much later than the S5, so I guess they did improve that part of the phone. And it is much lighter, much nicer feeling, very, very solid build. The aluminum build right here makes it super solid. I don't think you can bend these guys at all. I mean, I know some guy on the internet tried to bend a competing phone, and I don't think you will be able to bend any of these E5s and E7s. And if you ask me, I do love my S5 quite a bit, but if the S5 had this design, I would love it much, much more, because, I do like this design. It's very, very tough, very, very lightweight, and, it's nice looking. It's just nice looking. There you go. That's what I wanted to talk about in terms of design. Let's move on to the interface in just a bit. All right, guys, we're back, and as you can see, we're going to check out the interface of the Samsung Galaxy E5 and the Samsung Galaxy E7, both of which have pretty much the same UI design and UI interface, pretty much, and with very, very small differences. Both of them have pretty much 2 gigs of RAM. Some spec sheets will say one of them have 1.5 gigs of RAM, but based on my application right here, it does say I do get 1.9 and 1.8. That's pretty much the same for usability purposes. You get 2 gigs of RAM pretty much. When it comes to ROM, you have 16 gigs of ROM with about 11.6 gigabytes usable, and you can expand that with micro SD. So you do get pretty ample storage right there. One thing I will tell you though is that this ROM is very, very fast. This is not yet Lollipop, but it does have some Lollipop aspects to it. I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. If you look at it, it's running Android 4.4.4 KitKat, but it does have some Lollipop sort of UI elements to it, and it's actually much, much faster. I think they've improved the ROM quite a bit. And compared to my S5, it's actually much, much smoother for some reason. I don't know why, but of course the S5 came out much earlier in this lifespan, so I guess they've improved it quite a bit in terms of smoothness of ROM, and I'm really, really liking this. I wish the S5, my S5, had this ROM. It's so much smoother than my S5. One thing they have changed, one big thing they have changed is the multitask menu. If you press the multitask menu, it's now the card interface, which is similar to Lollipop. And compared to my S5, it's KitKat style with all of these square tiles, and no longer this sort of card interface, which came out with Lollipop's material design. All right, so one awesome new feature on the OS or the UI of the E7 is this new multitasking windowed mode that started with the Galaxy Note 3, if I remember correctly, or Note 4, and the Galaxy S5 that I have right now do not have this feature. You can this feature basically allows you to have windows of apps. As you can see, I have the camera right here, I have my messaging app right here, and I have YouTube right here, and I can watch YouTube on this windowed mode right here. I'll just swipe it away because there's an ad. Anyway, this is a nice new feature for multitasking. You can really do this. It's very, very nice multitasking, and the actual phone itself can handle it for some reason, even with just the Snapdragon 410 processor. Like I said before, the S5 do not have it. And also one limitation of the E5 is it also does not have this sort of windowed multitasking. It does have the multitasking similar to the S5, which is a bit of a bummer, but I guess that's what you get for a smaller screen. Alright, so as far as performance goes, as you can see, these guys are fairly similar because they're using pretty much the same processor, the same display and everything. And the only difference I can sort of tell is this sort of RAM speed, is that the E7 has faster RAM, 1769 points, versus the E5's 862 points on that RAM speed. So probably that's just a major difference here. Maybe you have a slightly slower clock speed RAM on the E5. But pretty much both of them have a 20,000 Antutu score with a 64-bit processor, giving you some pretty good performance. Alright guys, we're back, and as you can see, we're playing NBA 2K14, and I've actually lowered the volume because it gets very, very loud. NBA 2K14, of course, is one of the more popular games out there on 3D capable Android devices, and this looks very, very nice. There's not a lot of frame skip. With comparable mid-range devices that I would compare this to, other MediaTek quad cores, or maybe even some lower range octa-cores, I would say this is a little bit smoother. Maybe the Adreno processor is giving it some better, processing, or maybe the 64-bit capabilities of the processors is allowing it to, not have a lot of frame skips, even with these sort of zoomed in shots that usually give us some frame skips on other devices. So yeah, NBA 2K14, very, very good, yeah, very, very smooth. All right, guys, we're back, and we're using the E7 this time. And as you can see, we have increased the volume. We are playing a Dungeon Hunter 4 by Gameloft on the E7's display. I keep messing them up. And as you can see, we are playing a sort of a hack and slash game, which actually looks pretty good. There's not a lot of frame skips going on. Maybe a little bit, but still much, much better than other sort of octa-core devices in this price range, or even, of course, most local brands are lower than this price range. But the Snapdragon 410 is handling this game pretty good. Let's fight some more dudes. Yeah, pretty smooth. I am liking this gaming capabilities right here. Alright, so one more differentiating factor between the E5 and the E7 is the camera. The E7 has a 13 megapixel camera, which takes some pretty good pictures. I do have to say, nothing in the line of maybe the S5, but as you can see, there are pretty good shots taken from the E7 camera right here, a 13 megapixel camera. Looking at the shots from the 8 megapixel camera of the E5, they're nothing to sneeze at, or whatever term you need to say. They're actually fairly good looking as well, although they do tend to lower in quality when it comes to getting low light shots. Now, I do have to mention that both of them seem to take the pictures a little bit cold. Cold means slightly bluish tint on all of the pictures. Here's a front-facing shot of the 5 megapixel camera. Both are very, very good looking 5 megapixel cameras, as you can see right here. So yeah, very nice cameras on both of these guys. Just don't expect, you know, S5 quality on them. All right, guys, so I think that's about it for the Samsung Galaxy E5 and E7. And I think these are some of the best mid-range devices I've actually tried from an international brand. You know, LG does have their own sort of mid-range devices. Sony has their mid-range devices, but none of them, I think, would compare to the beauty, or at least the look, of the Samsung Galaxy E series. They're nice. These are nice, made of really nice material. You know, they're very solid, and I do prefer their designs to the E5. And at some points, I do prefer their ROM to the S5 that I have. It's very nice looking. The cameras are pretty good. They're serviceable, not flagship level, but still very, very good. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons now. So like I said before, it has an amazing design for mid-range phones. You can easily pass this off as flagship devices, and people will not notice. I was actually thinking of pranking people and telling people this was the S6, and I bet they'd probably believe me because it is a metal design, looks very, very premium. Bezels are very thin, and it looks really, really nice. Number two is I do like the powerful processor in here, the Snapdragon 410 64-bit. You can get a little bit higher with the Snapdragon 610, 615, but Samsung does have a slightly higher end version of these called the A5, A3, I believe A7. It is dual SIM LTE with an SD card slot. Of course, even the S6 does not have an SD card slot anymore. Of course, both of them do not have removable battery, but they do have an expandable memory. So that's one thing you want to look at. But yeah, I do like that you have dual SIM and dual LTE. That's a big thing here in the Philippines. And one thing is, I do like their price. They're very attractively priced. $12,990 for the E5, $15,990 for the E7. It's a bit of a bummer that the E5 does not have the sort of windowed multitasking, but both of them have some pretty good specs for the money. Of course, you will be competing with local brands and other China brands right now, but since there are Samsung devices, they sort of earn a little bit more respect in terms of reputation, is what I want to say. All right, so as for the cons of both of these phones, you know, I did mention that I'm not particularly fond of the back. It could be a little bit more interesting. You can make the Samsung logo shiny, maybe a silver Samsung logo. Remove some of these decals, which is probably required. But, you know, make the back a little bit more interesting would be nice for me. But, you know, as far as the design goes, I still think this is a winner for design. Number two con is, you know, there's stiff competition from local brands and other China brands out there. You know, there's a lot of octa-cores in the market these days. Other competing sort of copycat brands, sort of. But, you know, the Samsung still has that reputation of having quality design, pretty good UI and all that. And I do like this UI. It's much, much smoother than the S5. So yeah, I do like it despite the competition from other brands. Number three con is both of them do not have removable batteries, which is par for the course with this unibody aluminum design. But, you know, some people will prefer that removable battery, which comes with the S5. You know, the S5 still has that removable battery. And lastly, the E5 doesn't have that multi-window UI that the E7 has. I wish it has that multi-window UI, multi-window multitasking, or windowed multitasking. But it's not a deal breaker. You know, windowed multitasking or tiled multitasking, it doesn't matter. Samsung is still one of the best brands that has that multitasking feature, and other brands do not have it. So that's still a pro pretty much. All right, guys, so I think that's about it for the Samsung E5 and the E7. Of course, the E5 is $12,990, the E7 is $15,990, and I think they're pretty good flagship replacement devices. I know they're supposed to be mid-range, but anybody who's looking for a good Samsung phone can easily pick these up and not complain because they'll never figure out that they're, you know, it's not the highest end specs, it's not the highest end camera, it's not the highest. It's a metal build phone, really nice looking display, even though it's 720p, very thin, very lightweight design, looks flagship, but it's not as expensive as a flagship. And the ROM is much better. The ROM is much better than the S5 because it's much more improved. It has some lollipop updates to it. So yeah, 12,990, 15,990, very good mid-range devices. The specs could be higher, the price could be lower, but that said, it's a Samsung, and compare this to other sort of LG, Sony, or whatever mid-range. These are probably the best ones you can get. So there you go. Alex from thetechnoloclass.com here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.